Okay, so in this screencast, I'm going to be talking about development. And one of the reasons why development I think is important from an evolutionary point of view is that development is a process whereby there is a huge amount of change in the individual, and quite often those changes are put down to be environmental changes. I'm talking principally about psychological changes here. So we quite often see individuals as developing, and the particular trajectory, the particular path that they take is largely going to be dependent and mostly arising on the kinds of parenting that they might have, the kind of experiences they may have at school. It's kind of a process of learning. What we're going to explore here is the extent to which two things. First of all, that babies might be pre-wired to make sense of the world so that they can understand the world more rapidly and develop more quickly, learn things better quicker. And the second thing is that maybe the trajectory that a child takes isn't necessarily caused by the environment in the way that we usually think, but maybe the particular direct trajectory that is taken is an evolutionary response to particular kinds of environment. Now, there's a subtle difference, but hopefully it'll be clearer when we actually get there. So I'm going to talk about the nature-nurture debate to begin with, talking about Piaget's conception of the child, and then some more recent studies which explore the extent to which certain abilities may be wired in. And then I'm going to ask the question what child is for, and look at the extent to which development may be affected by an evolutionary response to particular environmental conditions. And then, if I get time, I'll talk about effects of peers, but I might not get there. Oh, Piaget, as I'm sure everybody hopefully is aware, he strode the stage of developmental psychology like a colossus, and still dominates much of the thinking within developmental psychology. Swiss psychologist, born towards the end of the 19th century, lived a very long life. I think died in the 1980s. His basic idea was that he didn't believe that a child was actually a blank slate per se. He didn't believe that a child was born with no ability, no knowledge. He believed that a child was equipped with very basic schemas, he called them. This is where the word schema comes from that we use in cognitive psychology. And these basic schemas are very primitive things. Things such as the ability to suckle might be an example of a schema. But they don't have very much knowledge at all. Okay, it's more, if you like, blank slate than nativism. One of the things that he suggested was that a child's first job, or a baby's first job, is to acquire what he called the object concept. He believed that, rather strangely, quite a philosophical kind of idea, that the babies had no real idea of the nature of objects. And objects wouldn't just include kind of tables, chairs, glasses, mugs, things like that. They would include things like people, and even the child themselves. These are all objects. These are all physical things. Some of the things that they need to understand about objects are that the objects exist independently of themselves. So if an object is no longer visible, or can no longer be touched, or can no longer be heard, then that object, according to Piaget, to the very young child, no longer exists. They need to acquire the idea that an object continues to exist even when it can't be seen. He believed that this was acquired around 2 years. If you remember Piaget's stages, between about between 1 and 2, there is a particular stage called the sensory motor stage. Between 2 and 7, there's a stage called the pre-operational stage. From about 7 to 11, there's the concrete operation stage, and then 11 onwards, all ages approximate, are what he called formal operations. So this transition from the sensory motor stage to the pre-operational stage was, in Piaget's view, representative of the child finally having understood the object concept, what an object is, that it continued to exist. The classic study that Piaget used to demonstrate that children have no understanding that objects continue to exist is to seat a baby on, say, a high chair, something like that, with a little table in front of them, and you place a desired object in front of the child, so it's in hair or something colourful, and the child shows interest in that object, and will probably also reach for it. So they'll attend to the object, they'll smile, they'll start to reach for it. If you then do it again, so let the child reach for the object, then do it again with the same or a different toy, and watch the child attend to it, start to look like they're going to reach for it. If you then cover that toy up with a piece of cardboard or something like that, such that the child cannot see it, or even put a cloth over it, an opaque cloth, then the child no longer reaches for it. Now, in Piaget's terms, this shows that the child believes that object no longer exists because they're unable to see it. Obviously, there are debates about that. Some people would say, and have said indeed, that the reason why the child is not reaching for the toy isn't because they believe that it no longer exists, but because microphone problem there, no longer exists, but because the child they've been distracted by the placing of an object there. You know, it's not to say that they don't think it exists; they just can't see it, so they lose interest. Yeah, same kind of thing. So people have then tried to test this more formally to see whether this is indeed the case. And these are the so-called habituation studies. And habituation studies rely on something that babies are very good at, which is attending to things, looking at things, becoming bored with things. You know, attention. Directing their attention towards interesting things, moving their attention away from things that are perceived to be uninteresting. Because babies aren't capable of an awful lot, and you can't just ask them what they think, what's in their minds. The key notions of this is that babies find repetition interesting to begin with, but if you keep repeating the same old, babies eventually become bored. Something new, something novel, something surprising can lead to increased attention, and stuff which is unexpected is surprising. How do we measure surprise in an infant? Well, we measure surprise in an infant by looking at the time, or one way of doing it is to look at how much time they direct towards an object. If an object is interesting, surprising, they will look at it. If it's boring, uninteresting, they will not look at it. So this is a study that I'm going to tell you now from 1991, so quite old now, but really quite a landmark study, which showed that object permanence could be demonstrated at 4 months. Okay, so this is the experimental procedure, and I think the most sensible thing to do is to just look at the picture on the left there. Okay, basically what happens here is the child is looking at this, and what you're seeing here is actually a screen, like a cardboard screen, a rectangular cardboard screen, which is rotating away from the child. So this is kind of, the child is facing this, and there's a mechanism which rotates this screen through 180 degrees, like that. This is shown to the child. This is moderately interesting to babies. Something's moving, a bit interesting. They'll look at it. They'll show attention towards it. But you keep doing it until the child starts to show that they're losing the will to live or losing interest in the thing. They're kind of looking away. This is the habituation phase. The purpose of it is basically to bore the child. What then happens is, if you look down on the left one there, the second one down on the left, an object, a block, is placed behind the screen, such that when the screen starts to rotate, you and I would know that the screen would stop when it hit the block. Crucially, the block is obscured by the screen at this point. So the screen starts to rise, the block's there, the block eventually disappears, it keeps rotating, and we would know that what would happen is the one which is third down on the left, that the block would stop the screen. Okay, that's what we think, adults. So what Baillargeon did is, following the habituation phase, put the block there, and the babies were shown one of two possible outcomes. Either they were shown the possible event at the bottom there, where the screen rotated, hit the block, and then stopped as if it hit the block, or it showed them the impossible event. They showed them the impossible event where the screen rotated, obscured the block, and then just carried on moving through the full 180 degrees as before. Now, the point of that, what happened there was that the actual block is on a trapdoor and is lowered as the screen rotates. So it's basically like a magic trick. Something which was there is now removed. Now, according to Piaget, babies should think that the block should cease to exist as soon as that block is obscured by that screen. So what they should expect to happen is the so-called, what is to us an impossible event, because there's nothing there in the baby, as far as the baby's concerned, because the object no longer exists, to stop the block. they should find the possible event surprising because there's nothing there to stop the screen. And remember, they've been seeing the screen rotating through 180 degrees over and over again, and the possible event should be surprising because the screen is doing something different to what it does before. 4-month-olds and sometimes 3-month-olds actually share your intuition, share the adult intuition, and they look longer at the impossible event rather than the possible event. Okay, even though they've been seeing that 180-degree movement over and over again. So this shows that babies have some idea that an object exists even though they can't see it because something has to be there to stop at the block. There's a lot of other different intuitions that babies seem to have. For example, there's a very primitive form of counting. Oh, I should have mentioned that this is also not just to do with humans. Cotton-tot tamarins, which is a kind of primate monkey, if you like, also show similar intuition. So humans, monkeys show similar kinds of intuition to human babies. So 5-month-olds show this primitive form of counting. This is from Catherine Wynne. Again, if you read these left to right, basically what happens here is, again, there's something similar to before, like a little puppet theatre. There's a little trapdoor on the right-hand side of it as the baby looks at it. The hand comes in holding onto a toy, in this case Mickey Mouse. A screen rotates up, obscures the object, and then another hand comes out and takes the Mickey Mouse away. Sorry, adds another Mickey Mouse to it. I'm getting confused. So we would know that there would be 2 Mickey Mouses there. The hand leaves empty. Then the screen drops, and either there's 2 Mickey Mouses, whichever, or there's 1. Now babies find the first one uninteresting because they kind of knew that 1 + 1 is 2. They find the second one surprising because where's the other Mickey Mouse gone? So there's a primitive kind of counting, and you can do this up to about 3, occasionally 4. They can't do 100 because it's not the kind of counting that adults do. It's a counting by, if you like, patterns almost. They also know not just that 1 + 1 is 2. They also know that 2 - 1 is 1. Excuse me, the PowerPoint overheads have gone rather wrong there. So what we have here is 2 objects are placed in the screen. In the case, the screen comes up, the empty hand enters, 1 object is removed, and then the screen drops, revealing either 1 object or 2 objects. Babies are unsurprised, don't look at the possible outcome where there's 1 object because that's what they expected. They know that 2 - 1 is 1, but they are surprised by the impossible outcome where there are still 2 Mickey Mouses there. Okay, so lots of other stuff about objects which I won't go into now, but the point of this is that evolution has very possibly wired in intuitions about the way the world works, because basically we've been living in a physical world. Our ancestors lived in a physical world going back millions of years, and having some basic understanding of the way that the world works wired into babies gives them a head start in learning. Another thing that babies might do is to recognize members of their own species. Now, many birds, nidifugus birds, these are things like geese and ducks and so on, do a thing called imprinting. They imprint on the parent, which is usually the mother. And this is a quick and dirty mechanism for learning who your parent is, but it can go wrong because the first thing that a duck looks at, it assumes is its mother, and it follows it around. But this is the picture of Konrad Lorenz, who discovered this theory, and he found that if you could get birds to imprint on a human, if that was the first thing that they saw. So this is a simple way of birds, very quick and dirty way of birds learning who their mother is. So we'll look at humans in the next screencast.